One day before my brother's engagement party, my father said, "You're not coming, we won't embarrass ourselves with you." Days later, my brother saw me at my company and laughed. "What are you doing here, applying for a job?" His fiancée froze. "No, honey, she's my boss." When my brother leaned across the mahogany conference table and said, "What is this, Em? Did you find out we were coming and apply for a receptionist gig?" I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table, the one with my name engraved on a brass plate he hadn't bothered to read, and sat down. 26 hours earlier, my father had called me a failure to my face and banned me from my own brother's engagement party. Now Daniel was standing in my building wearing his expensive watch, and he had no idea that the next 45 minutes were going to cost him everything he'd spent a decade polishing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'd been running North Vale Systems for a little over 2 years when everything with my family finally detonated. Before that, before the corner office and the leadership team and the $14.2 million in annual revenue, I was just Emily Carter, the younger sibling who left a perfectly good operations job at Ridgeway Logistics to chase what my father called a fantasy with a spreadsheet. My two co-founders, Marcus Webb and Priya Anand, had been colleagues at Ridgeway. We'd spent 18 months moonlighting on a logistics software prototype, running on 4 hours of sleep and the kind of desperate optimism that only works when you're too exhausted to be rational. When we finally quit our jobs and incorporated in March 2021, my mother said, "Well, I hope you saved enough to move back in when this doesn't work out." She wasn't being cruel. That's what made it worse. She genuinely believed failure was the only possible outcome because she had already decided what I was. My older brother, Daniel, was 6 years ahead of me and had never stumbled publicly in his life. Finance degree from Wharton, junior analyst at 23. Portfolio manager by 28. By 30, he was a finance manager at the Halston Group, a mid-tier investment firm that punched above its weight in the regional market. Daniel had the apartment in Gramercy, the Tag Heuer on his wrist, the vocabulary of a man who'd memorized the Wall Street Journal's opinion page. Our parents treated him like a press release they were constantly issuing to relatives. I had a 2014 Honda Civic, $11,400 in credit card debt, and a prototype that crashed every time someone tried to use the search function. The first version of our platform failed, not quietly, catastrophically. We'd burned through our seed funding by October 2021, our beta users dropped off, and Marcus nearly quit after his wife threatened to leave if he missed another mortgage payment. I remember sitting on the floor of our rented office space in a strip mall off Route 9, staring at a whiteboard full of ideas that hadn't worked, and thinking, they were right about me. That was the worst part. Not the debt, not the sleepless nights, the voice in my head that sounded exactly like my father. But I didn't collapse. I took 3 consulting contracts, boring, grinding work, rebuilding inventory systems for warehouses in New Jersey, and I used the income to keep the company alive while Priya rewrote the core platform from scratch. By March 2022, we had a working product. By July, we had our first paying client. By November, a venture capital firm called Ridgemont Partners put in $1.8 million at a valuation that made Marcus cry in the parking lot. I never told my family any of this, not because I was hiding it, because they never asked. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every awkward Sunday dinner, the conversation followed the same script. Daniel would talk about his latest deal, his latest bonus, his latest vacation. My parents would beam. Then someone, usually my mother, would turn to me and say something like, "And how are you doing, sweetie?" in a tone that meant, "Please don't say anything that ruins this mood." So I'd say, "Fine, busy, work stuff," and they'd nod, relieved, and move on. By the time Daniel got engaged to Sophia Bennett, a vice president at his own firm who'd climbed the Halston ladder faster than anyone expected, North Vale Systems occupied the top 3 floors of a renovated brick building in downtown Newark. I had 47 employees, a legal team, an executive assistant named Laura Keene, who ran my calendar like a military operation, and a growing reputation as the most aggressive logistics tech company on the East Coast. None of that mattered to my family. To them, I was still the girl who'd left a real job to gamble on something foolish, and I was about to find out just how little they thought of me. The Thursday before Daniel's engagement party, I drove out to my parents' house in Westfield to drop off a gift. I'd bought them a Le Creuset Dutch oven. My mother had been eyeing one for months, and I'd wrapped it myself because I'm terrible at wrapping, but I always tried. I found my father in the kitchen. Richard Carter was a retired insurance adjuster who carried himself like a man who'd been a senator. He set his coffee mug down on the granite counter with a deliberate, measured force, the way he did everything when he was about to deliver a verdict he'd been rehearsing. "We need to talk about tomorrow," he said. I was holding the wrapped gift against my hip. "Okay, what time should I get here?" I was thinking I'd come early to help Mom set up the "You're not coming." I blinked. The gift suddenly felt very heavy. What? "We don't want to feel embarrassed introducing a failure as our daughter in front of your brother's successful fiancé and her family." The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. My mother, Diane, was at the table folding napkins into precise little triangles. She did not look up. I waited for the correction, the softening, the "what your father means is." It never came. "Dad, it's decided, Emily." Daniel appeared in the doorway. He was wearing a slim-fit shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, the outfit of a man who wanted to look casual but had spent 20 minutes choosing it. He leaned against the frame and crossed his arms. "Dad's right," he said. "Tomorrow should be about celebration, not awkward explanations." My throat tightened. "Awkward explanations? You mean the part where your friends ask what I do and you can't figure out how to answer?" Daniel shrugged, one shoulder, effortless. "Well, are you not still figuring things out?" I looked at my mother. She was still folding napkins. "Mom, nothing." "Mom, are you seriously not going to say anything?" She smoothed a crease. "Your father and I discussed it, Emily. It's just one party. Just one party. Like being erased from your own family was a scheduling conflict. I set the gift on the counter. I remember the sound it made. A dull, heavy thud, like something final. So I'm your daughter when you need help setting up the smart TV, or when you can't figure out your bank app, or when you need someone to drive 4 hours to help you move furniture. But I'm an embarrassment at a party? My father's jaw tightened. Don't make this dramatic. Something inside me settled. Not broke, settled. Like a bone finally clicking into place after being dislocated for years. No, I said quietly. You already did. I walked upstairs before they could see my face. In my childhood bedroom, still painted the lavender I'd chosen at 13. I took the dress I'd bought for the party out of my closet. It was a deep navy wrap dress, $340 from Nordstrom, the most expensive piece of clothing I'd ever purchased for a family event. I folded it back into its box and shoved it onto the top shelf. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. It was still covered with framed certificates. National Honor Society, AP Scholar with Distinction, Dean's List, 3 semesters running, a participation trophy from a science fair I'd won second place in when I was 12. None of it had ever been enough. My phone buzzed. A message from Laura. Reminder, 10 right AM Monday. Final partnership review with the Halston Group. Their VP and team attending. Full leadership ready. Conference room A. I read it twice. The Halston Group, the biggest client negotiation of the quarter. If the partnership closed, we'd expand into 3 new states and double our enterprise client base. I exhaled slowly and forced myself back into the world where effort actually counted for something. Downstairs, I heard laughter. My mother, laughing at something Daniel said. No one came upstairs. No one knocked. I let myself out the back door. Friday morning, the morning of the engagement party I'd been banned from. I sat in my office at 7:15 a.m. I reviewing projections with my CFO, a woman named Rachel Torres, who'd spent 15 years at Deloitte before I convinced her to take a chance on a startup run by someone the financial establishment had never heard of. Rachel had a habit of tapping her pen against her teeth when numbers looked good. She was tapping a lot that morning. If Halston signs, she said, we're looking at a 32% revenue increase by Q3, and that's conservative. When? I said. When they sign. She smiled. When? At noon, while my family was clinking glasses at a brunch I wasn't allowed to attend, I approved a $220,000 marketing budget for the platform expansion. At 2 p.m., I reviewed the partnership contract with our outside counsel, David Atchison, a corporate attorney from Baylor & Finch, who'd handled our Series A paperwork and had since become one of my most trusted advisors. David was meticulous, dry, and had once told me that the best revenge in business was a clean contract and a long memory. The Halston deal is solid, he said over the phone. Their financials check out. One thing to watch, they've had some internal culture issues, complaints about a few senior managers, nothing public, but I'd keep my eyes open during the face-to-face. Culture issues, I repeated, writing it down. Yeah, arrogance, entitlement, that kind of thing. Apparently a couple of their managers treat support staff like furniture. I almost laughed. That evening, my phone buzzed with a photo in the family group chat. Daniel, Sophia, my parents, Sophia's family, all of them in the backyard I'd grown up playing in, standing around a table decorated with white flowers and gold accents. My mother had used the good china. My father was smiling, the wide, genuine smile he saved for moments he considered worthy. I was not in the photo. I was not mentioned in the caption. I screenshot it. Not out of spite, out of clarity. I wanted to remember the exact moment I understood the terms of the relationship. Then I put my phone in a drawer and went back to work. Monday morning, 9:47 a.m. Laura stepped into my office holding a visitor badge report and a slightly tense expression. Emily, the Halston delegation just arrived. Conference room A. I've set up the presentation deck and the financials binder. How many? 5. Their VP, Sophia Bennett, is leading. She brought her account manager, their head of operations, a junior analyst, and, Laura paused, a finance manager named Daniel Carter. The name hit my chest like a car door slamming. I didn't speak for 3 full seconds. Laura, who had worked with me for 2 years and knew my family situation in the broad professional strokes I'd shared during one honest conversation over late-night takeout, watched my face carefully. Emily, he's my brother, I said. Laura's eyebrows rose exactly 1 centimeter. Do you want me to reassign the meeting? I thought about it for maybe 5 seconds. Then something cold and precise took over. The same instinct that had carried me through the beta crash, the investor rejections, the nights when I'd eaten ramen at my desk because the budget didn't allow for anything else. No, I said. Let's go. I stood, buttoned my blazer, a charcoal Stella McCartney I'd bought with my first real bonus, and walked toward the conference room. Through the glass wall, I could see them. 5 people arranged around the long mahogany table. Sophia was reviewing her notes, poised and professional. The Halston operations head was adjusting his laptop. The junior analyst looked nervous. And there was Daniel, leaning back in his chair with his ankle crossed over his knee, laughing at something the account manager had said, looking like a man who had never once doubted his right to be in any room he entered. He hadn't seen me yet. I signaled to Laura. She opened the doors. I walked in. The moment Daniel registered my face, his expression went through 4 stages in under 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, and then, almost reflexively, like a muscle he couldn't control, a smirk. Emily, his voice cut through the room like a slap. What on earth are you doing here? Sophia looked up from her notes, her pen frozen mid-sentence. Daniel, you know her? Know her? He laughed, that short, dry bark I'd heard 1,000 times at family dinners. He looked at my leadership team, Rachel, Marcus, Priya, David on speakerphone, and then back at me, as if I were a punchline he'd been saving. This is my sister, the failure I told you about. He leaned over the table, his expensive watch catching the overhead overhead light. What is this, Em? Did you find out we were coming and apply for a receptionist gig? Or are you just here to embarrass me in front of my future partners? The room went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence where you can hear the HVAC system and the blood in your own ears. My team stared at Daniel the way you'd stare at someone who just walked into a church and started screaming. Marcus's jaw was actually hanging open. Rachel's pen had stopped moving entirely. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I walked to the head of the table, pulled out my chair, the one with the brass nameplate reading Emily Carter, CEO, and sat down. Daniel, stop, Sophia whispered. Her face had gone a color I can only describe as institutional gray. She was staring at the nameplate, then at the logo on the wall behind me, then at the framed ink magazine feature near the door that I'd never gotten around to taking down because Laura said it impressed clients. No, it's fine, Daniel continued, utterly oblivious to the atmospheric collapse happening around him. I'm sorry, everyone. My sister has a habit of showing up where she isn't wanted. Emily, please leave before security has to. Daniel. Sophia's voice dropped to a register I hadn't heard from her before. Low, controlled, terrified. Honey, stop talking. What? Why? She's not the help. Sophia's hands were flat on the table, pressing down as if she were trying to keep herself from sliding off the edge of reality. She's the CEO. She's my boss's negotiating partner. This is Emily Carter, the founder of Northvale Systems, the woman who is deciding whether or not to approve our partnership. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Daniel's hand, the one that had been gesturing dismissively at me, froze in midair, fingers still splayed, like a mannequin in a department store window. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. You're what? I folded my hands on the table. I'm the person who built this company. I'm also the person who is currently evaluating the Halston Group's professional standards and cultural alignment. I paused, letting the words land. Given what just happened, Daniel, I'm finding the cultural fit to be concerning. His face went through something I can only describe as a system crash. The smugness, the superiority, the lifetime of being the golden child, all of it flickered and failed like a monitor losing power. For the first time in my adult life, I watched my brother look small. Emily, I didn't, he started. Mr. Carter, Rachel interrupted, her voice crisp and professional. I'd recommend you stop talking. Immediately, he stopped. For the next 75 minutes, I conducted the most thorough partnership review of my career. I went through Halston's quarterly projections line by line. I questioned their client retention numbers. I asked about employee turnover, internal complaint records, and management accountability structures. I referenced the culture concerns David Atchison had flagged and watched Sophia flinch when I asked her to address them specifically. Sophia, to her credit, was exceptional. She answered every question with precision, handed over documentation without hesitation, and conducted herself like the professional she clearly was. She never once looked at Daniel. She didn't need to. Everyone in that room understood what had just happened and what it meant. Daniel sat in the corner of the conference room for the entire meeting without saying a word. He didn't take notes. He didn't check his phone. He just sat there shrinking, while the sister he'd called a failure ran the room he desperately wanted to belong in. When the meeting ended, I stood and extended my hand to Sophia. Thank you, Sophia. We'll take the rest of the week to review. You're talented, and I'd hate for your career trajectory to be affected by factors outside your control. She shook my hand. Her grip was firm, but her eyes were wet. Thank you, Miss Carter. Daniel didn't shake my hand. He didn't look at me. He walked out of the conference room 3 steps behind his fiancée, and for the first time in his life, no one in the room watched him go. That evening, my phone became a war zone. 6 missed calls from my father, 12 texts from my mother, a voicemail from Daniel that I listened to once and then deleted. It was 3 minutes of stammering, half apologies, and the phrase, "You could have warned me," repeated 4 times, as if I were the one who owed him a heads up. I waited until 8:20 p.m. I poured a glass of Malbec, a bottle from a case that a client had sent after we'd saved their company $1.3 million in shipping costs, and I sat in the bay window of my apartment overlooking the city. Then I called my father back. He answered on the first ring. Emily! His voice was a sound I hadn't heard in years. Warm, eager, almost desperate. Sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? Your mother and I, we had no idea you were doing so well. We were just worried about you, you know? We didn't want you to feel pressured at the party, that's all. I took a sip of wine. You called me a failure, Dad. Listen, that was poor wording. I didn't mean, you told me I would embarrass the family. Emily, we're having a dinner tomorrow night, just family, to celebrate your success. Daniel is very sorry. He didn't realize I had money, I said. He didn't realize I had power. He didn't realize I had a company that his fiance's entire career depends on. That's what he didn't realize. He knew exactly who I was when he humiliated me in front of my own team. Silence on the line, the kind of silence my mother specialized in. Emily, don't be like this, my father said. His voice had shifted. The warmth was thinning, the old impatience starting to bleed through. We're family. Families make mistakes. Family are the people who stay when the first version fails, I said. You weren't there for the first version, Richard, so you don't get to be part of the success. I heard him inhale sharply. I'd never called him by his first name before. Good night, Dad. I hung up. On Tuesday, I met with David Atchison at his office downtown. He had a corner suite at Baylor and Finch with floor-to-ceiling windows and a collection of antique fountain pens that he claimed helped him think. I reviewed the Halston file, he said, sliding a summary across his desk. Financials are clean. Projections are realistic. Sophia Bennett is a strong operator, but I pulled Daniel Carter's internal performance records as part of the due diligence package their legal team sent over. And, David tapped his pen, a 1940s Mont Blanc, against the edge of the folder. 3 formal complaints from junior staff in the past 18 months, all all related to condescending behavior, taking credit for others' work, and creating a hostile environment during team meetings. 2 of the complainants left the firm within 6 months. I sat back. So he treats everyone the way he treated me. Apparently, Halston HR documented the complaints but took no disciplinary action. Sophia Bennett signed off on one of the reviews. She signed off? She's his fiancée and his direct supervisor's colleague. The optics are exactly as bad as you think. I nodded slowly. Draft 2 versions of the partnership approval. One with Daniel on the account, one without. David raised an eyebrow. You already know which one you're sending. I do, but I want the paper trail to show we considered both options. I don't want anyone, especially Sophia, to think this was personal. He smiled, that dry, lawyerly smile. It's a little personal. Maybe, I said, but the documentation makes it professional. On Wednesday, I sent the first email to Sophia Bennett and the Halston Group leadership. Northvale Systems was pleased to approve the partnership, subject to one condition. Daniel Carter was to be removed from all Northvale-related accounts effective immediately. His conduct during the initial meeting constituted a serious breach of professional standards, and his internal performance record reflected a pattern of behavior inconsistent with Northvale's values. The decision was non-negotiable. Sophia responded within 2 hours. Understood. We'll make the reassignment by end of week. Thank you for your continued confidence in the team. She didn't fight it. She didn't defend him. I don't know what that means about their relationship, but I know what it means about her priorities. On Thursday, I sent the second email. This one was to my parents. It was short, 3 lines. Since you're so concerned about awkward explanations, I've arranged for a consultation with Margaret Chen, a top-tier financial planner at Ridgemont Wealth Advisory. She can help you manage your retirement portfolio going forward. That way, you'll never have to ask your failure of a daughter for help again. I attached Margaret's contact information. I didn't sign it love. I didn't sign it at all. Then I blocked both of their numbers, closed my laptop, and walked into the hallway where Laura was waiting with a coffee and the afternoon schedule. How are you doing? She asked. Not as an assistant, as someone who knew. Clear, I said. I feel clear. 3 months later, the Halston partnership had generated $1 million in new revenue. Sophia Bennett had been promoted to senior vice president, partly on the strength of the Northvale deal. She sent me a handwritten note, actual stationery, actual ink, that read, "Thank you for judging me by my work and not by my associations." I kept it in my desk drawer. Daniel, from what I heard through the professional grapevine, had been quietly moved to an internal operations role with no client-facing responsibilities. He hadn't been fired, but in the world he lived in, a world of visibility and status and being in the room where things happened, it was worse than being fired. He'd been made invisible. My parents tried to reach me through my cousin Angela, who called me on a Saturday morning in March. "Your mom's really upset, Em. She says you won't talk to her." That's correct. She says she didn't know about the company. She didn't want to know, Angela. There's a difference. Angela was quiet for a moment. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. I built something. I built it without them watching, without their approval, without their permission, and it turns out the thing I was most afraid of, doing it alone, was the thing that made it mine. Last week, I walked into a board meeting where we voted unanimously to open a second office in Philadelphia. Rachel tapped her pen against her teeth the entire time. Marcus cried again. "He's a crier. It's his thing. We love him for it." Priya brought champagne. Afterward, I stood alone in my office for a few minutes, looking out at the skyline. My phone was on my desk. No missed calls from my father, no passive-aggressive texts from my mother, no smirking brother in the doorway telling me I wasn't enough, just silence, the good kind. I thought about the girl who sat on the edge of a lavender bed, staring at certificates that were never enough. I wanted to tell her something. Not that it gets better, because that's too simple, and not that they'll regret it, because that's too small. I wanted to tell her, you don't need them to see you. You just need to keep building until you can see yourself. The city hummed. The lights came on. I finished my coffee, grabbed my coat, and walked out into the evening, into the life I'd built from the version that failed, the version no one believed in, the version that turned out to be the only one that mattered. They said I'd embarrass them. Turns out they only embarrassed themselves.